Okay, that's one example. Also, many atheists will say to Christians, and this is normally around the time that we start speaking up against homosexuality, they'll say, oh, the Bible talks against homosexuality in Leviticus, but it also says in Leviticus that you can't eat shellfish and pork, and you can't wear clothes woven from 2 types of material. So why do you Christians never talk about that? You hypocrites just keep cherry picking from the Bible. Come back and talk to us about homosexuality when you've stopped eating bacon. It goes something like this.
But if you want to talk about the Bible, and some people, Christian right, says, hey, wait a minute now, we got, it says in the Bible, man shall not lie with a man.
That's what it says. There's a man and a woman, Adam and Eve. I don't know if you've been around this. There's a whole thing where it's Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, I've been around there.
You've seen that?
Yeah. So, now, see, that is in there, right?
Yes.
But you know what else is in there, Dylan?
What?
You can't have material of 2 different cloths. You can't plant 2 different seeds. And get a load of this one.
But I do those things.
I know you do it, and then you got problems.
Wearing the same cloth right now.
Look at this. It says in Leviticus, the same Leviticus about that they quote on gay issues, they, shellfish, shall be even an abomination unto you. Ye shall not eat of their flesh, but ye shall have their carcasses in abomination. Whatsoever hath no fins nor scales in the waters, that shall be an abomination unto you. I mean, he said it 3-4 times. How clear does he have to be?
Right, but he was pretty clear because it says no fins, no scales. I mean, that's pretty abominable.
So, shrimp, clams, oysters, lobsters, they're all out. What we need is a red lobster amendment, okay? America, I need you to pass this red lobster amendment because it's an abomination and it's in the same Leviticus. So, of course, the question is, why is your pastor, your priest, or whoever it might be, not focusing on that at all, but they're focusing on the part about man shall not lie with a man?
The reason our pastors aren't talking about lobster is because the law of Moses does not apply to Christians. It never has. It was a civil law for the nation of Israel that was cancelled 2,000 years ago by Jesus. Christians are free to eat, drink, and wear within reason whatever we choose. Sorry. By the way, I just love in that video how the host has clearly got nothing to contribute to the rant, but he still tries to join in.
It says in the Bible, man shall not lie with a man.
That's what it says. There's a man and a woman, Adam and Eve. I don't know if you've been around this. There's a whole thing where it's Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, I've been around there.
You've seen that?
Yeah. So,
the full extent of this guy's biblical literacy. Yeah, like if you heard in the Bible, there's like a man and a woman, and there's like Adam and Eve, and then have you been around this? There's like a man and a woman and a woman and a man. Men and women. Ugh. Zero insight, and worse yet, zero effort into understanding a subject he's on national TV talking about. Anyway, for the record, the Bible actually speaks against homosexuality, not just in Leviticus, not just in the Old Testament period, but in the New Testament period too. In Romans, 1 Corinthians, 1 Timothy, these are New Testament books. It's also explicitly described as a sin. Now, why might moral issues carry over today, even though the law of Moses has ended? Well, remember what we learned before. If we were to take the British civil law away right now, the eternal, unchanging moral law that underpins it would still remain. The moral law never changes. Civil laws come and go and are variable, but the moral law is steadfast and eternal. So in exactly the same way, even though the law of Moses has now been taken away, the moral law that underpins it still remains. The law of Moses was just a temporary expression of something much deeper and long-lasting. You see, it was wrong to murder before we had the law of Moses, it was wrong to murder during the law of Moses, and it's still wrong to murder after the law of Moses. It was wrong to steal before the law of Moses, during the law of Moses, and after the law of Moses too. The rightness and wrongness of those things doesn't depend on the existence of the law of Moses. Think of Cain and Abel. Cain murdered Abel at the beginning of Genesis, well before the law of Moses, but God still punished Cain because the eternal moral law was always in effect. Paul writes, yes, people sinned even before the law of Moses was given, and though there was no law to break since it had not yet been given, they all died anyway. God's moral law never changes and is completely unaffected by the ending of the law of Moses. If something was immoral, it will always be immoral. And that's why you find the Bible speaking against homosexuality in both the Old and the New Testaments. And so you see, even though the law of Moses has gone, we're not living in an age of complete lawlessness right now. That's always the fear for some, that if we advocate leaving Moses behind entirely, then we're advocating complete chaos where people can just do whatever they want. But that isn't what's happening here. There's still a moral law, there always will be, and there's still a righteous God to uphold it. And indeed, remember what the writer to the Hebrews said. He cancels the first covenant in order to establish the second. The end of the old covenant doesn't mean that there's no covenant at all now. It just means that it's been replaced with a better one. And what does that covenant look like? Well, it's called the law of Christ. Sometimes it's also referred to as the royal law. And we'll explore what this new era looks like in the next part.